Hello, everyone, and welcome to the tavern. All right, let's talk Daredevil Born again. First off, something interesting happened over the week between these episodes. I watched other people's reviews. And sometimes I do this, and usually I don't, especially if I'm working on a series, because I don't want it to influence how I'm viewing a series. The opinions are all over the place. We got people who love it, we got people who hate it, we got people who are in between, everywhere. I could not find any consistency in terms of opinion. I could find stuff that both sides agreed upon, and I found tons that both sides disagreed upon, but I found it really interesting because those who were comparing it to the Netflix series gave it lower scores, and those who were not gave it higher scores. And as I've been going through the Netflix show to refresh myself on everything that's happened in the past of Daredevil, and to finally finish season 3, I'm almost done with it, by the way, I realize this show is a drastic downfall from the Netflix version in almost every metric. For those curious, I did reevaluate my scores based on if this was season 4 of Netflix. And when I look at my scores, they both drop by a single point, giving a 4 down to a 3 and a 3.5 down to a 2.5, because compared to what Netflix was doing, this is really weak. As its own show, it's above average. And from this point forward, I will be giving the season 4 score and the standalone score so that you can see where my mind is going when I'm evaluating these episodes. The second thing that came up was the viewership numbers. The viewership numbers are interesting to me because 7.5 million over 5 days sounds pretty good until you compare it to other things on Disney Plus from last year. Agatha All Along, yeah, I don't remember it either, but apparently it exists, got 9.3 over 2 days. Then, if you go to Star Wars, you have, on the 5-day total for Acolyte, there is over 11 million. And Acolyte is universally panned by just about everyone who has a brain. And then there's the Ahsoka series, which wasn't really good either, especially because it completely trashed Thrawn. Thanks, Disney, for taking one of the coolest Star Wars villains and making him a doofus. And that got 14 million viewers over the same time period. So we're doing almost half of Ahsoka. And yeah, it just isn't really getting the popularity. And I noticed on my view count, Daredevil has done less with that first episode than my average score on X-Men 97, which wasn't like doing gangbusters for my viewership numbers, but got decent enough numbers considering I'm not a Marvel shill channel. Apparently, the series didn't even start trending on social media, which in my opinion is more reason to review it because it means that people who aren't watching it should at least be informed of what they're missing, for better or worse. So join me as we discuss the next episode. And if my opening sigh wasn't enough to tell you how I feel about this episode, the breakdown will tell you everything you need to know. Okay, so when it comes to the story, mistakes were made. First off, we begin with Kingpin being told how to be a criminal by his wife. Sure, yeah, that's how that's supposed to go. This is done because violence between criminal organizations is on the rise due to the fact that they have no more leadership. And Kingpin's like, well, I mean, what do you think we should do? Which is not what Kingpin should be saying. We follow this up with a court sequence that's pretty good. You know, there's some setbacks for Matt as he's trying to protect White Tiger in the course of this trial. Then when things aren't going well for him, he decides to blurt out to the court that Hector is White Tiger, which brings him into chambers, of course, because the judge is incredibly angry. Why? Because Matt fought against this being used as evidence. In the previous episode, he said White Tiger's identity should not be known because it will bias the jury. Then in this one, because he's not winning, he's like, oh, I'll just tell everyone it's White Tiger, and then we'll talk about all the good deeds White Tiger has done, and that'll help him get exonerated. That's terrible writing. Also, I might be wrong on this because my only experience with courtrooms comes from mock trial, but I'm fairly certain if something has been removed as admissible as evidence, that's it. If you bring it up, you're in contempt of court. You can go to jail for that. Matt should be, at the very least, have gotten a stiff fine, which of course they don't bring up. But more importantly, he probably should have gone to jail for breaking the rules of the court. And the judge is like, well, there's nothing we can really do now. I guess we'll just continue with the proceedings as normal. And it's just like, wait, what? No, that's not how that works. And it makes me wonder if the people who wrote this understand how court proceedings work, or if they had a consultant available to say, oh, yeah, that would get you in huge trouble. Don't do that. You didn't have to write it like this. You do understand that. In the previous episode, that could have not come up. Or if it did come up, Matt lost the, claim to say this should not be admissible as evidence. Then when it's being used against White Tiger, Matt uses his lawyer skills to turn the tables and show that no, it is really important that Hector's White Tiger because he's a hero. He's helped the community. He's not a bad guy who would just murder a cop for no reason. They didn't do that. And I got so upset when this happened. I literally paused the show and walked away from the TV. Now, this has happened with other shows, but usually I'm not reviewing them. Except for Witch from Mercury, I had to pause and scream at the TV multiple times in that series. It's, oh god. Trust me, people, there's nothing worse than bad anime, except for bad comedy. Eventually, I calmed down and finished the episode because I wanted to record this review before I went to bed. The show just kind of continues. The courtroom scenes go exactly as you would expect them to go. And then we have Matt having his little celebration date with the girlfriend character whose name escapes me right now because she has so little personality. I kind of forget that she exists. But all their date scenes, both in the previous episodes and in this one, are just so banal. And there's no chemistry between these two actors. I don't know if I blame the actors for this, the direction for this, or the writing for this, but you got that sense of passion between Matt and other love interests in the course of the Netflix series. And yet, here, you don't have that at all. It's just like, I am man guy. I am lady person. Let us go on date now. We'll talk about random inane stuff. Inane stuff is my favorite subject. Ugh. And then, of course, Kingpin goes on BB Chanaru. Yeah, I get to use that picture again. And essentially give a ominous speech about how we need to take down all the masked people. Which, is starting to bother me. Didn't masked people, save New York multiple times at this point? Haven't they saved the world multiple times at this point? Wouldn't the average person be pro-superhero? It isn't like we've had a lot of series where there's massive amounts of devastation or innocent casualties that might cause people to go, you know what, I don't trust those superhero people. They've taken things too far. You might have been able to say this for the Netflix series because of different events that have occurred throughout the Netflix series, but if we're putting this into the MCU, which we are, I don't know how the average person would dislike superheroes enough to vote the anti-superhero mayor. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And it's actually starting to bother me because it's a core component of this series. But anyhow, he's on BB Chanaru and ends up giving his ominous speech. Then we have a shocking ending that nobody would ever have seen coming, ever. They totally didn't foreshadow it in any sort of way whatsoever. And I was shocked, flabbergasted. I was knocked off my feet onto the ground, hoping someone could please tell me I didn't see what I just saw. But alas, I saw it. It's what I'd say if I was a shill. It was a garbage, stupid twist that everyone should be able to see coming. It is both bad in terms of writing, and I know this is leading into a new arc, which I am fairly certain is stealing plot points from season 3 because it looks like we have an impersonator of the Punisher. Why? We've already done the bad guy dresses up as a superhero plot thing. We did it in season 3, and it was really well done in season 3. And if this is the level of quality you're going to be giving me moving forward, you can't do it as good as season 3. So yes, after watching the show, I had to calm down a bit before I sat down and recorded, because otherwise I'd be yelling the entire time. I gave this show the benefit of the doubt, and this is how they repay me, with such a terrible episode. Oh, let's move on to the characters before my head explodes. If you think the story's bad, the characters don't fare much better. Let's begin with Matt Murdock. He is kind of an idiot in this episode. As I mentioned earlier, he'd get in major trouble for what he pulled off in the court. And if you wanted to do the bad end for White Tiger, it would have been better to have the court system put an innocent man in jail where you could have done, say, an appeal, rather than Matt Murdock horribly breaking the law in order to save a man. It just doesn't work, and he's a better lawyer than that, and he's not an idiot. And I don't know why they're making him an idiot, but they are. It also becomes pretty obvious in this episode that Matt Murdock has no chemistry with his team, who, by the way, does basically nothing during the trial. Would have been nice if, maybe Matt wasn't the only person trying to run this case, but no. They could just kind of sit there and stare with glazed over eyes. That's good too. I mean, yes, Cherry did technically help bring one of the witnesses over in one of the most boring car chases I've ever seen in my life. That's not character chemistry. That's just something that character did. And it goes also to Matt and his girlfriend, where there's just no passion. There's no heat. They are just, you might as well just put two mannequins there and had them just do voiceover. It'd have been exactly the same. And I don't know why. I don't know why I could look at the first two episodes and go, man, Charlie Cox is kicking ass. And then you go to this episode and you're like, everyone's phoning it in. That's good too. Hopefully he can improve in the next episode. Thank goodness Charlie Cox still does a great job as Matt Murdock. I just wish Matt Murdock wasn't written like a moron who has no chemistry with anyone he meets. Then we have Wilson Fisk, who is barely in this episode. He comes off as weak and ineffective, especially because he needs his wife, who is not a criminal mastermind, by the way, to tell him how to run his criminal empire, which he doesn't want to run anymore. Yeah, that's super in character for Kingpin. And then we have the ending where he flexes to BB about how he's going to get rid of all the masks. Because I guess he has to look tough at some point in the show. And that's it. Not much from him. I know a lot of people who had issues with episode 1 and 2 thought Kingpin came off way too weak. I was willing to kind of give a wait and see because Vincent D'Onofrio was doing a good job in those episodes, and I felt like they were building to something, like this is some greater scheme where he is clearly trying to amass power in more than one way. And this episode says, nah, he's also just kind of like, I don't know what to do. They're criminals. Finally, we have Hector, the White Tiger. He gives a really good performance. Not only do I like the actor, but I also like the character. It really would have been nice to have more White Tiger in the series, but odds are he's not showing up again, which is rather unfortunate. It is also unfortunate that I've heard that the actor has passed, and if that is the case, we'll never really get White Tiger again. Well, I mean, unless they decide to do the girl White Tiger who took over when the original White Tiger was killed in the comics. I honestly had no problems with that character. She didn't show up in a lot of stuff, but, I was fine with her. That's comics, this is live action, and I would have liked to see White Tiger do something, then potentially getting replaced by his niece in like 2 or 3 episodes, or next season, or on some later Marvel project that I can't even fathom because they keep coming out with more stuff, and I keep raising an eyebrow going, why would you do that? I don't know, but it feels like a really bad waste of a good character. As for our minor characters, not much I can really say. Isabella is just kind of talking circles around the Kingpin. Kingpin's British major domo guy is really kind of boring. And no one else is really active enough in the show to do anything that makes me go, oh yeah, let me talk about that character. The minor characters are so weak in this, it's kind of pathetic. Especially if you go back to the Netflix series where the minor characters, even ones who were like, oh, I'm never going to see that character again. And then they show up in two episodes later and you're like, oh, hey, I kind of like this guy. Yeah, the writing is so weak, it really hurts the characters too. And it's really unfortunate because there's some great actors in this show and they deserve better. Aesthetics are one of the stronger parts of this episode. There are a couple licensed songs that are used in the course of this episode. They are done as diegetic, so they're part of the scene, and I was fine with that. I mean, obviously you would rather have real songs than just some made-up song or some generic techno track or something, so I do appreciate that. There's one Spanish song that's non-diegetic used near the end of it when Hector's been brought out of jail and leading to our shocking ending. And our end credits actually use nature sounds that I assume are supposed to be from Puerto Rico because Hector references what nature sounds like in Puerto Rico and how he misses it, and that tied into it really nicely, and I thought it was a good touch. I really did appreciate that. In fact, I can't really complain about the sound design this episode. It's one of the few things they did right. When it comes to the visuals, we get a weird mix again of like very static, bland headshot close-up, basically looking at me. That's most of the court trial. It's just headshot, 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 headshot. Right, bland, stuck in the middle, boring camera work. We then have other scenes where they're being a little bit more creative. When Kingpin is doing his more threatening little speech thing at the end, you get some nice camera angles, a couple nice uses of camera work during Matt's date, a little bit of stuff there which is kind of nice. So it's kind of a push in terms of the camera work. We do get one of the most boring car chases I've ever seen in my life, and there's not really a lot of tension because we know where he's going, we know they're going to get there, we know that the witness will make it on time because that's how these things are done in TV shows. So there's no stakes, there's no tension, and there's really, really bad camera work that makes the chase not really exciting or interesting. It doesn't take down the visuals that much, but it's not really anything interesting either. It's just enough to be considered acceptable. Despite the anger that I had in this review, I am glad I gave the series the benefit of the doubt. I wanted to come into the series with a positive attitude, or at least as positive of an attitude as I could have done. And I'm glad I did. Because I could have just dismissed this as, another Disney Marvel product, pass. But I'm actually watching it, and I'm going to continue watching it because even if this gets worse, I want to know how much more worse it gets. However, I can tell you right now, there is no way the series will achieve Netflix levels. I know what I've been told, that around episode 5 or 6 is when it really starts to pick up, but just because it gets better than what it began as, does not mean it will be up to the Netflix standards. After all, the fight scenes in episode 1 and 2 were terrible, and the usage of CG in the first fight scene in the opening episode, which I didn't even talk about, but the fact that they had to use CG for those fight scenes already has me worried for what the good version is going to have. In fact, if this is the improved version, and they tossed away a fair chunk of the original show, how bad was the original show? That series must have been massively unwatchable. All that being said, my final verdict for Daredevil Born Again Episode 3 is a 2 out of 5. On the good side, we have a great performance by the actor who played Hector. We have good use of music, but everything after that is either banal, like a lot of the courtroom scenes, or that weird push that we have with the camera work, or it's just straight up bad, like the lack of chemistry between characters, the god-awful writing, and the general lack of energy in this episode that just makes it a slog to watch. I shouldn't have to pause an episode halfway through because I'm so annoyed with it. I am very worried where the show is going because I think the series is going to get worse before it gets better. The good episodes, I don't have enough faith anymore that those will actually be up to the standards that I expected. I get the feeling this is going to be a very tough watch for me, and that's rather unfortunate because I wanted to enjoy this series. But let me know in the comments what you think of Daredevil Episode 3. Was it up to your standards? Was it below your standards? Did you like it? Were you surprised by the ending? Or did you completely skip the show because you think it's going to suck and this episode confirms your belief that the show is going to be bad? Thank you for watching. I'm really glad that people are enjoying my work, and it just motivates me to make more videos. So expect more videos very soon, especially in another episode of Daredevil next week. But until then, please have a wonderful day, and I'll see you at the tavern.